event. I'm Meg Carney, founding director of LaSalle University's Solstice Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program. Welcome to the first in the series of 7 readings taking place here in Auburndale, Massachusetts, as part of our summer 2023 residency, start of our fall semester. As we open this physical and virtual space, I would like to acknowledge that the territory on which LaSalle University stands is that of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts people. LaSalle's campus is a place to honor and respect the history of Native and Indigenous communities who reside in the area currently known as Massachusetts, and the continued efforts of their community leaders to ensure that that history is not oversimplified or lost. This statement is one small step in acknowledging the difficult history that brought us to reside on this land, and to help us seek understanding of our place within that history. Ownership of land is itself a colonial concept, and we acknowledge that the ideal restorative measure is to return land to Native and Indigenous communities. The Solstice MFA program of LaSalle University seeks ways to be part of a better future going forward. As we grow, we pledge to seek out Native writers for our faculty and guest faculty. And meanwhile, we have established the Debuse Fellowship for Native and Indigenous writers, which will grant an incoming Solstice student $1,500 toward their tuition every year. We hope to inspire others to take action as well. One way you might do so is to consider a gift to the Native Land Conservancy based in the area, currently known as Mashpee, Massachusetts. And more information can be found at nativelandconservancy.org. And now for tonight's reading. First up, we will have fiction alum, Solstice fiction alum and summer graduate assistant Noah Shea, who will be introduced by our assistant director, who is also a Solstice alum, poet Quentin Collins. Then poetry faculty member Kathleen Aguero will be introduced by Solstice alum and poet Connor Jett. And then last, fiction and creative nonfiction faculty member Sandra Scofield will be introduced by Solstice fiction alum and summer graduate assistant Temple Murphy. All right, Keith, come on up to the mic.
When Noah Shea entered the Solstice MFA program as a student, in some ways I knew him only as an enigma. Joining in the midst of our fully online residencies due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Noah appeared as a mysterious figure, equally hidden in his Zoom square by the dim lighting in his workspace and his impressive beard. Now, 6 months after his graduation from the program, I know that beneath the shadow and facial hair is a writer with attention to important and illuminating details, character-driven voice, and vivid imagery, among many other creative talents. Through Noah's time as a Solstice student, I was privileged to watch the development of Beneath the Robes, his historical novel manuscript that follows Abel Duncan, a Union Army sharpshooter who becomes a spy operating in the Confederate South. At each student reading, and then eventually Noah's graduating student reading, he treated us all to settings that we could see, smell, and squish between our toes as Abel traversed a swamp. He ramped up tension and scene with dialogue and movement that heightened suspense, making us anxious as his main character. Most of all, he kept attention with a tight narrative. Here's an example from his manuscript. Scarecrow clopped down the dirt road as the sun was disappearing below the trees. The shadows grew long, and Abel cursed under his breath that he neglected to bring a lantern. He squeezed Scarecrow with his boot, and she quickened her pace. If they could just make it back to the city before nightfall. Another rider approached from the opposite direction. His horse had a walk and gave Abel a slow nod. When Abel passed him, he dug his heels into Scarecrow again. The sun dipped below the horizon and darkness washed over the sky. whatever stars should have been visible were obscured by clouds. Noah's writing talents meet their match in his role as a literary assistant. Within the Solstice community, Noah exemplified the program's philosophy of intelligent compassion by welcoming and supporting the newer students, taking the lead in activities and often offering his hand to assist with everything that makes this residency experience magical. Plus, with his actual magical talents, and yes, real magic, not figurative, he and his fellow January 2023 grad, Deborah, set a high bar for the grad party during our first in-person residency here at LaSalle a year ago. It's no surprise that he would eventually become one of our grad assistants, and I am thrilled to welcome him to the stage. Noah.
Thank you so much, Q. That was really generous and a lot to live up to, so I'll try my best. Okay. Thank you for also summarizing my manuscript as well. So I'm reading from Beneath the Rose, and this is a scene in which Abel and an enslaved woman that he befriends named Henrietta, he's helping her escape. And so they're going to a cabin that's owned by a couple named Zebediah and Mary, and it's in the middle of a raging storm. And Abel figures out that this was a station on the Underground Railroad last time he was here, but because it's the middle of the Civil War, the Underground Railroad is not operating. But notably, the couple does not know that Abel is a spy. Abel strained to listen inside the cabin. He tried to make out the sound of shuffling feet or the clanking of plates on the table, but it was impossible to hear anything over the patter of rain and the bombastic thunder. He rapped on the door with an open palm. They waited. He rapped again with a closed fist. He was about to bring his hand down on the door once more when it swung open. Jesus, Sam, what the hell are you doing out there? Zebediah said in the doorway. His eyes darted between Abel and Henrietta. What happened? Who is this? This is my friend, Abel said. She needs our help. Zebediah craned his neck past the threshold as if he could somehow see anything through the raging storm. He looked like he was searching for someone else, but who would be crazy enough to follow him in this weather? Zebediah pulled himself back inside. Better come in then, I suppose. He stepped away from the door and gestured them in. Abel entered first. Henrietta stood out in the rain for a moment, hesitant, like she was deliberating her other options. Then she sighed and heaved her shoulders before following Abel into the cabin. Zebediah took a seat at the table. He studied them. Mary was seated on a chair on the other side of the room with a boot in the lap, its sole peeling off from where the welt had worn. Abel and Henrietta joined Zebediah at the table. No one spoke. After a minute, Mary rose, placing the damaged boot on her seat. She approached the stove, took a box of matches from the top, and opened the firebox grate. She struck the match, leaned over, and waited for the fire to catch. Then she placed the kettle on the stovetop before returning to her seat and watched them. Zebediah put his hands behind his head with his elbows out and massaged the back of his scalp. I wasn't expecting this. I'm sorry, Abel said. He meant it too. Not that he was sorry for bringing Henrietta here, but he was sorry that his only option was to make Zebediah and Mary complicit in her escape. He hadn't wanted to, but he was far enough out of his element already. I didn't know who else to turn to. Is it that plain? Mary finally said. Zeb, I told you this would happen. Word will get out. It always does. I said from the very start, it's a matter of time. I think you have the wrong idea about me, Abel said. I'm not your enemy. I need your help. But you found out about this, Mary half yelled. Zeb, you promised me this would be kept a secret. If this boy can find us, what makes you think the slave catches? What's done is done, Zebediah said. He wasn't looking at anyone. Don't help nobody to send them back into the storm now. And what if they let him right to us? We still feel what's done is done then? Don't suppose it matters how I feel about it in that case. Who is she? Mary asked, although it sounded more like a demand. And just who exactly are you? She approached Abel as she said it, and shoved a finger in his chest. Henrietta stiffened. My name is Henrietta. Mary turned to face her. And let me guess, Henrietta, you want to escape to Virginia and go north? Well, this isn't how it works. We can't just take flight in the middle of a storm and set off to the border. This kind of trip requires a plan. It requires resources. You can't expect us to be able to smuggle you across the Potomac just like that. Not tonight, no, Zebediah said. I don't want to hear it from you, Zeb. This is your fault. You brought this boy here when you knew the risks. You don't know what I want, Henrietta said in a voice stern enough to match Mary's. Mary looked her up and down. You're slave. What else could you want? Can we just take a step back for a minute? Abel asked. We're all on the same side here. Yeah? You so sure about that? Mary was indignant. Mary, Zebediah said, they already know. Sending them away now is as much a risk as letting them in. He bowed his head. We can help you escape, but not tonight. When? Abel asked. Henrietta needs to get to safety as soon as we can manage it. We'll notice her absence at the plantation. Just depends, Zebediah said. I gotta scout the area. Can't rush it. I ain't going nowhere, Henrietta said. Now Abel turned to stare at her. You can't be serious. I thought we agreed. You help me, I help you. This was the deal. I want to change the deal. With all due respect, Zebediah interjected. You won't survive as a free woman down here. You know that already. You're begging for a death sentence. That's the best case scenario. More likely, they'll put you back in chains within the week. I understand what I'm doing. Henrietta's voice was unwavering, determined. My whole life has already been rough for me. I don't understand, Abel said. You have an opportunity to be free. You're going to throw that away? And what about everybody else? Asked Henrietta. What's to become of them? What do I have up north? What about my husband, my son? Will they be there when I get there? My life was already taken from me the day they took my family. What's waiting for me up north ain't no different from what's waiting for me down here. Don't matter if I die here or there. I ain't got nothing left to lose. Maybe I can save some people from suffering what I had to suffer. Some things are worth dying over. So what do you want then? They asked. Why did you come here? I can help you, Henrietta said. Can you? Said Zebediah. Don't get me wrong. You can use it, but there isn't time to show you the ropes. I can handle myself. I'm sure. It's just that I don't want to feel like there's blood on my hands. Lord knows I've already plenty. Let her help, said Abel. She doesn't need hand-holding. She's already helped me more than I could have asked. A long pause followed. Mary was the first to break in. Help you how, exactly? Time for revelation to come. Abel needed more allies down here if he meant to make it to the war's end. And sure, revealing himself was dangerous, but this was a moment of desperation. And in those moments, chances need to be taken. That's how a person survives. He couldn't trust Zebediah and Mary, his true identity. Then was there anyone left in the entire Confederacy who could help him? It's about time I made a confession, Abel said. My real name is Abel Duncan, not a Southerner. Come from Maine, and I'm a spy for the Union. And sent here to discover as much as I can about the Confederate war effort, and Henrietta has been instrumental in helping me achieve my ends. Zebediah and Mary exchanged a look. I knew I was right to trust you, Zebediah said. But let me ask you something. What is it you're fighting for? Abel scrunched his nose. Well, it was for the Union, the peace, but I've grown wary of pointless death. There's a great injustice against humanity committed down here, said Zebediah. The most pressing crisis of our time. Cowardice rules the day, and there aren't enough people around who are willing to stand up for what's right. That's the reason we are slow to trust, I suppose. Zebediah sure sounded a lot like Abel's father speaking as such. Abolition was the only thing that mattered to some people. And if he had met Zebediah back home, he would have shrugged it off. Abolition is not more important than unity, Abel would have said. It's not more important than the idea of this country. That was how he used to think. But after bearing witness to what constituted normal here, well, it was easy to see the ways in which he had been wrong. The way I see it, if the Union loses the war, then all your efforts are for naught, Abel said. The goals are intertwined. And if Lincoln refuses to end slavery after the war, then what? He's promised to do as much. He's a politician, Mary said, which means that when the time comes, he will move in the direction the wind is blowing. I'll do you one better, Zebediah said. Your victory will be nothing if slavery does not come to an end. Are you willing to make a difference right now? That point was true enough. What would victory mean without freedom for the 4 million enslaved people? Would that mean all those who had already given their lives had died in vain? It at least meant they had died for something lesser. What would his own death mean if it did not help end that evil institution? Some things were worth dying over. Abel turned to Henrietta. I agree with Mary, he said. The prudent thing for you to do is to go north and live your life as a free woman. That being said, I want to help you do this too, and we work well together. Henrietta nodded. Zebediah stroked his silver-streaked beard. Okay, it's settled. We all agree now that the secrecy of our work in this place is the highest priority. They agreed. Mary shook her head and was the first to stand up. She stepped out into the middle of the room, knelt down, and pried one of the floorboards up with the tips of her fingers. She reached into the hole so far that her shoulder pressed against the floor. She felt around and produced a piece of paper. Then she put the board back in place and slid her chair to join the others. She unfolded the paper until it covered the entire tabletop. It was a giant hand-drawn map of Richmond and the surrounding area. Able spied some plots of land marked with an X or a circle. There were arrows that followed alongside the roads, brief notes written in shorthand. Was the road safe to travel by day or night? The road was too dark or too risky. Some plots had tallies next to them, and others had notes that said to return next month when there was no moon. The paper itself was crumpled and weathered. It looked like it had been used over the course of a long time. This is the prized possession, Zebediah said. It's the product of 2.5 decades of scores of escaped Negroes have come through this cabin. It's been harder since the war broke out. We used to have a system in place, but it's gotten too dangerous. We've lost what little support we had. You're so close to the border, Henrietta said. There must be thousands of people who need your help. I understand, but there are only 2 of us. Now there are 4, said Abel. Not enough, Henry said. It will never be enough, Henrietta crossed her arms. Maybe so, but we're no help to anyone if we're dead, Zebediah said. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Everyone, James Cutter Jeb. I graduated summer 2018 as a poet. When teaching writing, it is imperative to recognize the whole student, their world, their beliefs, and their hardships. I was honored to study how to teach writing, pedagogy, from Kathy, as well as have her as my creative thesis mentor. Kathy's pedagogy class explored the best practices for teaching writing and how, as teachers, we can improve this process for those who struggle. Kathy instilled my passion for teaching writing to those who need it most. Her class ignited my journey in teaching communication to autistic and neurodiverse individuals as an SLP. As a mentor, Kathy had heartfelt interest in both my poems and my day-to-day. We met at the Gula Gula Cafe in Salem to discuss feedback, but more so to catch up over lunch. Kathy's heart and warm presence is a precious gift here at Solstice. Kathy has also gifted us with her poems. Her published works include World Happiness Index, After That, Daughter of, The Real Weather, Thirsty Day, and Investigations, The Mystery of the Girls. She is a recipient of a Massachusetts Fellowship in Poetry, a fellowship to the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, as well as several awards for her work. In addition to being a Solstice faculty member, Kathy teaches for Changing Lives Through Literature, an alternative sentencing program, changing lives through reading and discussion. These are just a few of Kathy's numerous accomplishments. It is my honor to introduce Solstice faculty member Kathleen Aguero.
Short person adjustment here. Thank you, Connor, for that wonderful introduction. Yes, I miss seeing you at Guru.
Yeah,
So actually tonight I want to read prose and I want to explain why. At some point I felt I needed to shake my writing up a little bit. And poetry became very angsty. I felt like I had to go through all of that stuff. So I joined something called Smoke Long Quarterly. A friend recommended this to me, which is a flash fiction journal, and they have a kind of community where they give you prompts, write posts to respond to other people. They have webinars and things like that. And I thought, okay, time for beginner's mind. Let us not forget that. Every time we write, I don't know about you, every time I start to write, I thought, I've never done this before. And so, because Solstice is such a wonderful and supportive community, I would like to take the risk and read one of these pieces that I wrote. The prompt was to write about a situation, an uncomfortable situation that didn't go far enough to be really bad. And I put 3 of these slightly uncomfortable situations together. So this is called Late 50s Triptych. Confessional. Saturday mornings, I woke, fear filling my body. My mother drove us to confession weekly so we could receive communion on Sunday. I took care not to let the large silk scarf folded in a triangle to cover my hair and then tied under my chin slip too far back. The church was lit dimly by candles and smelled like stale breath. When it was my turn to enter the dark confessional booth, I knelt and waited to hear Father slide back the wooden screen before I began. A mesh screen covered the wooden one, so I couldn't tell which priest it was. The jolly one who let a kitten loose in our first grade classroom, the tall, dark-haired one who never smiled. Bless me, Father. I began my child's list of tired sins. I talked back to my parents twice. I fought with my brother and sister 3 times. In preparation for our first communion, we practiced confessions in the classroom, even breaking commandments with words like adultery, covet, that we didn't understand. One boy broke so many. Sister Aloysius called the other nuns to see, and they all beamed. I thought he was showing off. Still, he got so much approval. After my absolution, I went to a pew, pulled down the middle, and recited my assigned Hail Marys and Our Fathers. But doing penance didn't relieve my guilt or anxiety. I knew from our classroom practice there would be worse to come. Young and Jasmine. And I don't know if it's clear, this piece takes place in Sicily. The trees that line the long driveway of Tranquesiete and Via del Palma had branches low enough that I could pull myself up to climb, and were just tall enough so that from them I could see into the cobblestone side street below and across to the line of other buildings where some of my friends lived. We'd only been in Mondello for a year. Everything was strange and interesting. The large aloe plants we thought of as pickle bushes because they were green and juicy inside when we whacked off a fat leaf. The cacti with an appetizing fruit appearance. The fragrant rosemary bushes that shared my sister's names. As lizards scooted along the edges of the terrace. If my brother caught one to escape, it left its tail behind, and he chased it, still wriggling. The Eggman relayed messages from one neighbor to another along his route. Senora Aguero, Senora McKeever wants to know if you can come for lunch tomorrow. Please tell Senora McKeever, yes, my mother would reply. To get to school, my younger sister, my brother, and I rode our swing bikes, shipped all the way from Long Island across a field where the goat herd led his mangy flock. And the 2-room British school was wonderful. I was free from the sharp eyes of the nuns with their flash attack rulers and their "that's for what you're gonna do." In this new school, there might be only one student in each grade. I could go through my lessons at my own pace without being rebuked for skipping ahead to the more interesting stories at the end of the reader. I studied French, Latin, even Shakespeare. No one thought I was too young or too stupid to understand. My aunt sent us hula hoops and 45 RPMs like flying purple people and get a job from home. But I didn't miss home. Here we walked to the beach at recess where we played girls against boys, a risky game the nuns never would have allowed. Some things I didn't understand, but accepted. My parents paid two guards for protection. One was an elderly gentleman patrolled with a rifle. The other we never saw. Mafia, my mother said. These invisible protectors guaranteed they would get back anything that was stolen. I had the sense someone told my parents this was what they had to do, but I didn't think about it much. Other things were trouble, like the barefoot children wearing only t-shirts I saw gathered around public pumps in the villages we drove through to get to Palermo, and that when walking in the city with my family, strangers exclaimed over my nearly white blonde hair and felt free to pluck a strand to examine. And it wasn't fair that except for across the street to a friend's house, girls couldn't go anywhere by themselves. Even a 13-year-old schoolmate, nearly grown up in my eyes, had to be accompanied by my 11-year-old brother when she walked somewhere. My mother was the only woman in the international community who rode the bus. When asked about it, she would just laugh and say that, surrounded by her 3 fair-haired children, a scarf modestly covering her own hair, maybe she looked like a Madonna, so no man pinched her bottom or grabbed her breast. This new place we lived in was strange and sometimes dirty, but how wonderful to be free of the nuns' constant warnings not to sin and their certainty that even though you might not realize it at this very moment, committing sins that would lose you God's love, sins perhaps you didn't even understand. So I felt happy sitting in that tree, the faint and comforting smells of dawn and jasmine wafting up from the street. My brother, sister, and I were playing pirates, peering from our make-believe bird's nests, scanning the horizon for enemy ships, when I heard a grunt from the street below. A man, pants unzipped, was grinning and waving his fat penis at me. Disgusting. I yelled for my brother and quickly climbed out of the tree. My brother shouted at the man who went away. It looked like he was waving a hot dog at me, I giggled nervously as the 3 of us walked back toward the house. My previously protective brother shot me and annoyed me. I wasn't sure what I said wrong, but I knew I offended him. I was settled in the living room reading a book when my mother returned from her lunch with Senora Makina and walked over to me looking concerned. "Are you okay?" she asked. Why was she asking? Then I realized my brother must have said something about that man in the street. My mother's question must have something to do with that. But why wouldn't I be okay? I hadn't even been thinking about the fat hot dog penis. I was reading my book. But studying my mother's face, I sensed that fine was not the right answer. I should be upset. Did not being upset mean I had committed some invisible sin? So I lied. Lying. What season was it? I don't remember. I imagined my mother in a light brown coat, her head as usual covered by a scarf, so perhaps it was fall. She wore those items in so many photographs from the late 50s, just no clue at all. I don't remember exactly what streets in Rome we were walking in, or the specific sites the large Franciscan friar was pointing out. What I remember is how he pulled me to him, tucked me under his arm as if he were a favorite uncle instead of someone I just met. Some friars we'd met in a season who I remembered fondly, though vaguely, for I was only 8 or 9, had provided the introduction. And so a member of their order was giving us a personal tour of Rome's religious spots. It was hard for me to see anything tucked under this coarse, voluminous robes as I was. I remember the heavy weight of his arms, and he just finished lunch. The strong smell of red wine and garlic on his breath. The beauty of the church's Baptist trees was lost on my vision, narrowed by the robes draping his left arm on one side and the swish of his belly on the other. I was resentful, indignant, trapped. A child and a girl, how could I protest to a man of God? The only time I rebelled against a priest was when one pressed me into service to act as altar boy on a cruise ship. Girls couldn't serve at Mass. How stupid was he? How sacrilegious. At the consecration of the host, I refused to ring the bell, although he frantically motioned me to do so, one hand waving adamantly behind his back. This was different. The friar wasn't asking me to do anything against church practices. Children, especially girls, were supposed to obey priests. If this friar wanted to take me prisoner, or so it felt, it was not my place to protest. I looked at my mother, who had been known to stand up to the nuns at our school when they bullied us, but she didn't make eye contact, much as I willed it. Was she so engrossed in sightseeing? Did she not sense my distress? Or was she unwilling to say to this man of the cloth, please let my daughter go. She doesn't like it. Perhaps she was stymied and didn't know how to extricate any finesse. So she looked steadily at whatever the friar pointed to. I didn't think of looking to my father, though he wasn't Catholic and had no particular opinion about priests. When it came to us children and most other things, we all looked to my mother for direction. Neither of them would rescue me, and I didn't think of rescuing myself by squirming until he had to let me go. I wanted to protest. You can't just pull me under your arm as if I were a bundle of dirty laundry. I was angry, but I was a girl, and I was good. Being good meant being quiet. Good meant obeying priests and nuns. And even after trying hard to be good, I might still be a bundle of laundry after all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for adjusting the microphone for short people. I'm in the same. So I will introduce Sandra. So I'm Temple, and so here we go. Every writer has that moment at 2 or 3 in the morning where they are forced up, mind stumbling with ideas and edits. Those grabbing thoughts dragging your feet out of bed to hunch over your computer or notebook. You end up embodying the gremlin that pilots your nervous brain, feeding that terrible beast with more words and stories that it craves. While a relatable moment, most writers face such moments alone. The writing craft prone to introverts and isolation, obviously. Few can say they have someone else up at 2 or 3 in the morning with them. Someone else persuaded by their own goblin of writing within them to email solutions and mentor other writers through a plot hole. I was lucky enough to have that experience with Sandra Scofield mentorship. Sandra was my mentor for 2 semesters at Solstice, including my creative thesis. A writer more apt at listening, befriending, and even wrangling her own writing goblin, it was not uncommon for me to receive an email late at night for having casually found solutions to my latest chapter plot issues that I could not have seen, or well-needed craft critique. I am honored she took those moments to help me, getting up in the middle of the night to email me just a few lines that I needed. She was honest in what potential she saw in my writing and what I needed to hear to get over myself, and in what I was lacking and how I could strive towards it. Her wit and work ethic is unmatched. She is a vivid writer and approaches her work and the work of others with precision, deep consideration, and vigor. She is the author of 7 novels, a memoir, a book of essays, a book of stories, 2 books on crafts. If you don't have them, you need to get them. And she most recently self-published a collection. This is not a novel, full of stories she wrote while teaching at Solstice. To top it all off, she is also a talented painter. Would you all please join me in welcoming up Sandra Scofield.
Thank you for that. There was a lot of fun on my side too. Well, this is the night for Catholics. I'm about 90 pages into a Catholic novel called All the Nuns Are Dead. And it is launched when a young, poor, unwed mother converts to Catholicism. And because of that, is able to launch her precocious daughter's excellent education plans. But it is a gift that comes at considerable cost, ultimately. This particular section has nothing to do with nuns, however. It is early in the book. Margaret, which is a German. Margaret is 21 years old, the mother of a 5-year-old, and they live with her mother. She's lived her whole life. Hank Borden, Henry Borden, is someone she met in the pharmacy where she is a clerk. They sort of got together because he was there one day when there was a violent Wichita Falls thunderstorm, and he gave her and his daughter a ride home. It's set in Wichita Falls, Texas, in early 1950. Hank Borden was neither short nor tall, but a little soft. He had nice hazel-colored eyes and a dimple in his chin. He spoke quietly, almost hesitantly. Their conversation was almost all questions and answers. What movies and music they liked. Could he cook? Could she drive? He was the youngest of 3 sons, and only he had failed to go to college. Hank told her his parents owned the furniture store, and he was their main man. How named could he be, she thought, working for his parents. She asked him if he lived at home. It was embarrassing. She lived with her mother, but she had responsibilities. She needed the help. He thought, Lordy knows, I have a room in a boarding house. I'm saving for my own place. And she thought, we'll never have sex. She flushed crimson, her heart beat hard. He put his hand on her cheek. Are you okay? She stepped across to the living room and sat down hard on the couch. Hank had nothing to offer her. He wasn't even all that good looking. He was the type who would get fat. In his own way, he was as dependent on his parents as she was on her mother. She just told him she was tired. He sat down beside her. We'll go out to a nice restaurant soon, he said. Maybe this comes Saturday, a steak place. Oh, stop, she cried. Can't you see how stuck I am? I'm a child. I live with my mother, and she works on Saturday night. Both of them were flushed. Hank cleared his throat, then he let himself out. She closed the door after him and threw herself on the couch and sobbed. One Sunday afternoon, soon after, Rita said, is your fella some kind of secret, Margaret? Is there a reason you never mentioned him? She had her arms full of laundry, and she tossed it on the couch. He's nobody, Margaret cried. She grabbed a towel, shook it out furiously, and folded it. He gives us a ride. We visit sometimes. He goes away. He lives nearby then. No, he does not, Margaret took a deep breath. Margaret, does he stay? The thing was, Rita was never home before 11:30 at night. No, he does not stay. A few days later, Rita came home with a new radio. Now you have something to do with your fellow, she said. The radio was hot red plastic. Margaret took her to her room and turned it on low. She found a station playing love songs, cried herself to sleep. Honestly, she couldn't see what was in it for Hank, but he did become familiar. And God knows it was nice not to take the bus and then a few block walk home. And it always seemed to be windy in Wichita Falls. The red radio was a big help. There were so many great shows and they laughed a lot. It was easier to laugh than to talk. Then one night they moved from the kitchen to the living room couch. She got up to say goodnight to Penelope, who was reading in bed, and she shut the bedroom door. She returned to the couch and sat a little away from Hank. She felt nervous. Hank took her arm, pulled her closer. At first, she demurred, but he wasn't going to put up with that forever. He put his hands right on her shoulders, looked at her straight on, and said, "I'm going to kiss you now. Unless you tell me to leave and not come back, I'm going to kiss you." So she shut her eyes and leaned into his embrace. His kiss was almost chaste, tentative for all the bravado, and she was the one who turned to make it a more comfortable fit. She was the one who scooted closer and opened her mouth to his tongue. "Jesus, Margaret," Hank said. She screwed up her face, thinking about it. "I'm going to tell you something now. Don't look at me while I say it. Look away." He complied, rolling his thumbs round and round. "I was with somebody once. I was a sophomore in high school, and then I had Penelope. I didn't really know him, and I never saw him again. Now, by once, I do mean one time, you understand. There was no love to it, no tenderness. I only heard his first name, and I forgot that. It shut me down a long, long time. But I had Penelope, and I am blessed by her. And here we are. I don't want to rush. You got to understand. And besides, we're in my mother's house, and my child is on the other side of the wall. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be okay having sex with you or anybody. You should think about going away right now and never coming back, because I'm messed up and I think you're looking for someone sturdy." Margaret, he said, after a minute went by. She put her fingers on his mouth. "Shh. You think about it, whether you can kiss me and hold me and be okay with that. Until I feel safe and sure about something more." Hank put his head in his hands, and there was a long silence, and she realized why he was crying softly. He looked up, his face was all wet, his nose clogged. He wiped his face with his sleeve, and she thought, "Oh, he'll go away now." And she was all right with that. She hadn't been looking for a lover, and if she had a type, it was Montgomery Cliff and Red River. And Hank was a lot more like Joseph Cotton, round and smooth. He pulled out a handkerchief from her pants pocket and wiped his nose and face, and he apologized. He held her hands and he said, "Margaret, you're just a girl, just a babe. You've got a whole life." He stopped to blow his nose. "Look now, all that stuff you said is in the past, and I'm in love with you now. I'd never treat you any way but good. I'm no brain, you're smarter than me, but both of us are lonely." He sat up tall. "I know you aren't where I am with the idea of us, but you are going to get used to somebody being nice to you, and that somebody is me. And besides, I love Penelope." And Margaret stared at him. Baby steps, Hank. And then it was pleasant. It was. It could go on forever as far as Margaret was concerned. Wouldn't suit Hank forever. He looked for reasons to get closer to her, to touch her, innocently usually, but deliberately. Rita cut the deck. She said, "Why in the world don't you and that boy go out on a proper date on a Sunday, my day off? You don't think I would mind being here with myself, do you?" So they did. They started going to the movies on Sunday evenings, and afterwards they parked in front of the house to kiss and talk. Spring came, and Hank found a place for them to park a few blocks away from the house. On a dead end street where no one passed by. His kisses were more ardent now. He put his warm hands against her breasts with the soft fabric of the blouse. She knew she didn't feel what he felt, but she also knew she couldn't take his good humor and generosity and give him nothing in return. If she closed her eyes and gave over to the warmth of their bodies, it felt fine. And so sometimes she crawled onto his lap and wrapped her arms around him. Sometimes she held back so that he had to lean over and put his arms around her. She didn't know what to make of her own feelings, which were anxious and heightened, and she didn't know how to tell him, "You're my first boyfriend." Now he was growing impatient. He hugged when she pulled away. One night he took her hand and made her feel his erection. "You're making me crazy, Margaret. We're not teenagers." Margaret reminded him that she was Catholic. "I can't have sex outside of marriage." They were sitting in his car at the dead-end parking spot. It was warm enough to roll the windows down. They had kissed, and she had undone the top buttons of her dress so that he could caress her through the soft fabric of the bra. She was thinking and thinking. He felt remote, and she started to cry. He hadn't said anything in response to what she said, and she didn't even know what she wanted him to say. He pulled her blouse off her shoulder, did the strap of the bra, and freed her breast. He kissed her all over and sucked her nipple. Something in her pinched hard and then opened so that heat spread through her body, and she put her arms around him and held him tight. "So we get married, Margaret," he said. "No problem then." There were challenges, though. He wasn't Catholic, for one thing, so either he had to convert, going through months of instruction, reading all the laws of the church, or else he had to promise to support his wife's faith and allow any children under marriage to be raised Catholic. And he definitely wanted a child of his own. He said he didn't want to take up being Roman, but he would honor her commitments. He would go to church with her. The bigger challenges were right now, he said, in finding a way to live together. He told her he had a few logs in the fire and he was looking for new, better paying work, but he had no real savings. He had a car payment. She said, couldn't his parents help with some money, like as a wedding gift, so they could make a deposit on a modest apartment? He scoffed. Finally, he said, "We just have to save every penny until we have a deposit, 2 months' rent." They didn't talk about a timeline yet. Margaret didn't say anything to her mother. It was the nicest time of the year, and they went on long drives or to parks in the evening with Penelope. Margaret watched the daughter with Hank carefully. They seemed easy together. She stopped fretting, determined to have her own home, her own life at last. And then Hank came over and said his parents said they were cutting his hours. They didn't need him so much, they told him, because get this, he said, they were hiring a professional salesman. In other words, business was so good they could afford to hire someone better than their own patient, loyal, blind, stupid son. He was furious. But he found another job at a car dealer handling paperwork. "Just until I find something better," he said. "I have irons in the fire." One evening, Margaret sent Penelope to the neighbor's house to play and went to her mother, who was mending something at the sewing machine. And she asked if Hank could move in with her, just for a while until they could save for a deposit on an apartment. "We want to get married, Mother." Rita was startled. "In this tiny house," she said. "Where would we win?" She didn't say anything about the marriage notion. But Margaret had thought her argument out. They would push the 2 twin beds together for them and make a cozy bed for Penelope on the couch. Margaret would put it away before they left in the morning so that nothing would intrude on the order of the house. It was just for a little while. Hank would contribute to groceries, of course, and he would do repairs. He would do whatever Frida wanted him to do around the house. And he's so polite, Mother, and he's clean and he's serious, and well, he likes it. Frida had to go next door and talk to the neighbor. Margaret hated the thought of being subject to the conversation, but at least her mother hadn't slammed the door going out. She washed dishes and tidied the kitchen and living room. She plumped pillows and shook out the couch cover, whatever she could see to be busy. She made chocolate chip cookies. She was just taking them out of the oven when Frida returned. She put 2 cookies on saucers, made ice water, and sat down at the kitchen table. Frida said, okay, 3 months. 3 months he isn't paying for wherever he lives now, nor here, and 2 of you save every cent of his salary. And then you get your own place, and if not, he moves anyway. Understood? Margie nodded. What is it you're going to get married? Now, when he moves in here and gets in bed with you? Or later, when you move? Margaret hadn't even thought about it. I have to talk to Father Danley, she said. About living with your boyfriend in my house? Mom, please, about marrying a non-Catholic. Frida got up. You got 3 months. But Hank didn't move in. He had it with his stalled life. He called in sick at the car dealership and drove to Dallas and had an appointment with the Halliburton company. They were hiring a field crew. He took basic tests in writing and arithmetic and did fine. He was weighed and examined by a physician. He was healthy, and he was told to come back the next morning. So he took a room at a ratty hotel, went out and had dinner and watched TV until the network went off the air. The next day, there were 2 people telling him all about working in an oil field. The hours the same, the heat, the cold, the wind, the sand. He said that was all right. That was all right with him. He wanted a man's job. He wanted a job that would last and go somewhere. They said that was that kind of job. So they gave him a chit to do across the street to a restaurant for lunch. And then when he came back, they said, start with a decent wage, there'd be clear pay steps. And next year, if the work was good, there'd be a substantial raise. And the benefits started day 1. There was a ladder to good positions when it wasn't for sissies. It wasn't 9 to 5. He nodded. He chuckled and said, yes, sir, that's for me, sir. He had to be in Odessa in 2 weeks, but 1 would be better. So he said yes on the spot and signed the papers. He was going to start as a helper. They told him again, the work's going to be hard, but it'll get better the more you learn. There will be a lot of new boys, he was told, and half will be there for the second months. He wanted to laugh. Somebody had written this script like a bad movie. He was given a piece of paper with names and phone numbers of 3 Halliburton widows who might have a room for rent until he was past probation and had saved for deposits for his own place. As soon as he got to a payroll, he called the first name on the list. The lady had a man moving out the end of the week. I'll need time to clean it top to bottom, she said. He took her address and mailed her a check the next day. Margie was stunned that he told her what he had done. Hank told her, we're going to leave our lives and make new ones. We'll get married in Odessa. Oh, she thought, how she wished she hadn't asked her mother if he could move in. She wanted to protest. He hadn't said a word about what he was up to. But before she opened her mouth, he said, I didn't want to tell you in case I failed. I wanted to surprise you. I'll find a house and move you and Penelope as soon as school's out. We'll be together, just like we talked about on our own. One night before he left, Margie walked Penny over to spend the night at the neighbors. Hank had rented a nice hotel room. He took Margie out for steak, and in their room, they drank gin and tonics, the only alcohol Margie could stand, and got a little drunk. Now he said, you go talk to your priest, and I'll come for you as soon as I pass the probation period. And when I have money to get us into a house, I'll come again. And we'll get married here in your church. We'll have our own damn life, Margaret. She took a hot bath in the big tub and crawled into the bed naked. Hank was lying on his back, his arms and legs stretched out, his sex exposed, grinning at her. Everything happens fast. And you've been waiting a long time. Thank you.
Could we have one more round of applause? Noah Shea, Kathleen Aguero, and the trustees.